The Frozen City. Chapter 1. The Disappearance. Winter held the village of Hälsvik in an iron grip. The sky was grey, the sun a rarity at this time of year. Everywhere you looked lay snow, settled like a heavy blanket over the landscape. In the far north of Sweden, where daylight seemed to cease existing in winter, a silence reigned that filled even the coldest nights with foreboding. Erik Löfgren sat in his small cabin at the edge of the village. It was an old house, one of the few that had not been modernized like most homes in Hälsvik, a place that had withstood the passage of time. Much like Erik himself, he was no longer a young man, and the weight of his past life was etched into the lines of his face, into the grey that had begun to claim his temples. His eyes had hardened over the years, sharpened by all he had endured in Stockholm, where he had worked for many years as a detective. A life he had left behind. His past had caught up with him, but here in Hälsvik, he hoped to find the peace he so desperately needed. Yet the silence was always broken, and now it happened again. On a stormy evening, when the wind howled across the fields with icy force, the message came. Anna Karlsson had disappeared. Anna was a young woman of 25, known throughout the village for her warm smile. She worked as a waitress in the local cafe, always ready for a chat with the villagers. There was nothing unusual about her, people said, just a local girl. But that night, she had vanished, and no one had any idea why. It was Inspector Olof Sundström who called Erik. Erik didn't know him well. Olof was new to the village, a young man with overzealous ambition, but it wasn't the sort of case that usually kept anyone awake at night, especially not in winter. Yet Olof needed more than his own limited experience. Erik stood up and pulled on his thick coat. Outside, the cold was nearly unbearable. The path to the cafe was hard to see beneath the snow, but its lights pierced the gloom like the last trace of life in the dark. Inside it was warm, but the atmosphere was far from welcoming. Conversations died the moment Erik entered. Elin, a local journalist, sat in the corner with her eyes fixed on a notebook. She looked up at him, but said nothing. "What exactly happened?" Erik asked, his voice low and calm, tinged with urgency. Olof looked troubled. "We're not sure. Her car was found by the roadside, completely abandoned. No trace of her, no signs of struggle. It's as if she disappeared into thin air." "And why is it so important that you call me?" Erik asked as he hung his coat on the rack. "You're experienced," Olof said, his voice uncertain. "I'm new here, and I know there's always more than what you see at first glance." Erik nodded slowly. The young inspector was right. There was always more, much more. "Have you found anything yet?" Erik asked, glancing at Elin. She didn't seem eager to join the conversation, but her eyes followed his every move. Olof shook his head. No tracks, no witnesses, only her car. And then the messages. Messages! Erik's interest sharpened. Olof pulled an envelope from his bag and placed it on the table. Inside were newspaper clippings and handwritten notes. Strange messages had been circulating these past weeks. Something about a frozen city. No one understands what they're supposed to mean. Erik picked up the papers and began reading. The text was cryptic, full of references to an old legend about a city buried deep beneath snow and ice. He'd heard the story. Every villager had. The frozen city was a tale of mystery, told around the fire, but never taken seriously. What does this have to do with Anna? Erik asked, without looking up. I don't know, Olof admitted. But Anna was searching for something. She'd been different lately. She talked about strange dreams, dreams of a city under the ice. Sometimes it seemed like she was drawn somewhere, but she couldn't explain it. Erik set the papers down and stared out the window. Snowflakes drifted through the air, a determined quiet settling over the village. The storm's getting worse, Elin said suddenly, her voice soft but steady. Anna would never just disappear. Something else is going on. Erik turned to look at her. I know, Elin. I'm going to find out what happened. We don't have much time. The cafe clock ticked on, but time itself felt frozen. Outside, darkness pressed against the windows, and the storm howled like a wounded creature. The silence in Hälsvik was broken, not by sound, but by a question hanging heavy over the village. What happened to Anna? Erik rose and walked toward the cafe door. The storm raged harder than ever, the snowflakes now large shadows swirling through the sky. It felt as if the weather itself mirrored the village's tension. Something ominous lingered in the air. Olof followed him outside, his heavy footsteps swallowed by the snow. We need to go to where the car was found, he said, tightening his scarf. I really hope you can find something. All we have is an abandoned car. Erik nodded, eyes fixed on the wall of snow ahead. You're doubtful, he said. But I don't believe this is a simple disappearance. Something deeper is at play. They walked on in silence, their footsteps muffled by the thick snow. Every step pulled them deeper into an unknown realm, like a trap set by nature itself. When they reached the place where Anna's car had been found, Erik stopped. The car stood motionless beside a remote road, a dark shape swallowed by the surroundings. It was an ordinary, well-kept Saab, but something was off. The door was open, yet there were no signs of struggle. No torn metal, no forced lock. Erik crouched and studied the snow around the car. No footprints, no trace of anyone walking away. It looked as if Anna had left of her own accord, or as if something had drawn her away to a place no one knew. The landscape was deserted, the air deadly still. What do you think? Olof asked, his face tense from the cold. Erik stood, brushing the snow from his hands. She wasn't taken by force. This wasn't an attack or a sudden flight. This was something else. Maybe she discovered something she couldn't share. They scanned the surroundings, but the landscape revealed nothing. The trees stood like silent ghosts, and the mountains loomed like a wall of dread. It was as if nature itself resisted them. The cafe might be a good place to start, Erik said. People here notice everything. Someone must have seen something, maybe something small, but important. Olof nodded and followed him back. Inside, conversations had already resumed, hushed, cautious, as though Anna's disappearance meant nothing. Despite their concern, the villagers seemed disturbingly at ease with the mystery, and that was exactly what struck Erik. Elin was writing again when they returned, her eyes fixed on her notes. She looked up. Did you find anything? She asked quietly, though curiosity burned in her voice. Nothing. No tracks, no clues. It's as if she vanished into nothing, Erik said, leaning against the bar and ordering a strong coffee. Olof stepped forward. Have you heard anything? Anything connected to the frozen city, or to the messages Anna had? Elin hesitated, her eyes flickering as though weighing a choice. "There are more stories about that frozen city," she said softly. "You're right, Erik. It sounds far-fetched, but since Anna started sending those strange messages, I've begun to wonder. There's something in this village that doesn't add up, something we're refusing to see." She turned her notebook so Erik could read. Notes filled the pages, fragments of conversations with villagers, references to the frozen city, to ancient rituals, to people who vanished long ago and never returned. "What do these symbols mean?" Erik asked, pointing at strange signs Elin had sketched. Elin looked uncomfortable. "Those aren't ordinary symbols. I've seen them in old books only the elders know of. It's an old language, a lost code tied to the village's first settlers. They believed the frozen city beneath the ice would cleanse their sins. The rituals have long since stopped, but the stories remain." A chill crawled up Erik's spine. The story of the frozen city had always been a myth, but here, in this cold, desolate village, where history seemed to merge with the snow, it started to feel disturbingly real. "And Anna," Erik asked, "why would she be interested in these old myths?" "She loved talking about old stories with the villagers, but lately she changed. She asked strange questions about the village's past, about those who once lived here. She said she needed to find something. She felt the city beneath the ice was calling to her." Erik rose. Tension tightened his muscles as the realization hit him. Anna hadn't simply disappeared. She had been searching for something the rest of the village refused to see, something perhaps too dangerous to uncover. "I'm going to keep searching," Erik said firmly. "I need to know more about this city, and I need to know why Anna was looking for it." "And if you find nothing?" Olaf asked. Erik looked outside, at the darkness closing in like a shroud. "Then I'll keep searching until I find the truth." Chapter 2. The Lonely Cold. The next morning, the air was still heavy with snow. A thick layer of mist hung over Hälsvik, as if the village was sleeping beneath the whiteness of the flakes drifting slowly from the sky. It was a typical winter day in the northern reaches of Sweden, but for Erik, it marked the first day of a search that would change his life. As he stepped out of his small cabin, he looked up. The sky remained grey, the sun no more than a faint blur on the horizon. Silence enveloped everything in a way only winter in a remote region can. You heard your own breathing, your own heartbeat, and the muffled sound of your footsteps in the snow, nothing more. Elin had told him the previous night that she had spoken with some of the village's older residents, people who knew more about the ancient legends. Erik had advised her to dig deeper, but today he decided that he himself wanted to learn more about the village's past. He made his way to Hälsvik's old community hall, a wooden building as old as the village itself. It didn't look like much, but it housed the village archives, and perhaps there he would find answers that reached beyond the myths everyone spoke of. The door creaked as he pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty hall. Inside, the air was cold and thick with the smell of old paper and mildew. The archives were stored in a few large, worn cabinets against the walls, organized in a way that suggested no one had ever truly attempted to bring order to the village's history. Erik began leafing through the oldest documents, searching for anything related to the mysterious frozen city. It didn't take long before he came across a small, dusty book, an old chronicle written by one of the village's founders. The text was difficult to read, but Erik managed to decipher the important details. The story described a group of settlers who had arrived in the region centuries ago and had encountered something they couldn't comprehend: a city beneath the ice. Something in the text struck Erik deeply. The chronicle spoke of a ritual performed by Hälsvik's first inhabitants, a ritual in which young women were sacrificed to awaken the city beneath the ice. It sounded like a myth, a tale meant to warn the elders against the dangerous forces slumbering beneath their feet. But the chronicle also insisted that the city was not merely a legend, it was real. Erik closed the book with a heavy sigh. It felt as though he had uncovered something he wished he hadn't, something the village itself had tried to forget, a history buried deep beneath the snow and far from harmless. As he stepped out of the archive, a weight settled in his stomach. It was still early morning, but Erik knew he had to go to Elin. She needed to know everything. Chapter 3: Forbidden Paths. Elin was already waiting for Erik in her small heated apartment above the cafe. She sat behind a wooden desk, her eyes fixed intently on a stack of old books. When Erik entered, she looked up but said nothing. It was clear she had found something. "You've discovered something?" Erik asked as he sat down across from her. Elin nodded. "Erik, I continued digging into those old symbols we found. I went to the old church, the stones scattered around the village, and there's something I didn't expect to find. It turns out those symbols don't appear only in the old chronicles. They're carved in various places here in the village, hidden in the walls of houses and even in the foundations of the church itself." "What does that mean?" Erik asked, his voice sharper now. "It means the myth of the frozen city isn't just a story, it's real. The symbols are ancient forms of protection, but they're more than that. It looks like the village was built around a ritual, one meant to keep the city beneath the ice alive." A cold shiver crawled down Erik's spine. "So you're saying the village was created to guard this city?" "Exactly. And now the stories I've collected are beginning to fit together. Anna. She discovered more than I thought. She'd been diving deeper and deeper into old documents, the ones most people here would rather forget." "And her disappearance?" Erik asked, his gaze unwavering. "How does that fit in?" "Anna was probably not taken at random," Elin said softly. "She was searching for something, and she found it." Erik stood up abruptly. Elin's words echoed in his mind like a ringing bell, growing louder. Anna hadn't simply vanished. She had gone looking for the frozen city, and had now lost herself in the shadow of something far darker. "I'm going to the old church," Erik said. His voice weighted with the gravity of what he had realized. "We need to know more. We need to find the place where that ritual took place." Elin rose and looked at him, doubt clouding her eyes. "Are you sure this is the right choice? If we dig deeper, we might uncover things we're better off not knowing." "I need to know," Erik replied. "Anna risked her life for something we don't understand. I'm going after her." Chapter 4: The Dark Depth. The wind howled across the graveyard as Erik and Elin approached the old church of Hälsvik. Snow drifted in slanted lines past the weathered gravestones, like white spirits unable to find rest. The church loomed against the grey sky, a crooked wooden structure with blackened walls, battered by storms, cold, and time. Erik paused at the wooden gate. "When I was a child," he said, "I was told no one should come here at night, not because the dead might rise, but because the living might see something they shouldn't." Elin gave a nervous smile. A typical Hälsvik story. But she knew he was right. Everything in this village carried the scent of something ancient, something buried deep beneath the snow. Inside it was dark. The heavy door groaned as Erik pushed it open, the sound echoing like a whisper through the empty space. The air smelled of dampness and candle wax. The pews were rotten, the windows cracked. A single beam of light fell through the stained glass and glimmered on the dust swirling in the air. Elin turned on her flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness and lit a row of weathered paintings along the wall, scenes of the Last Judgment, but strangely distorted, as if the painter had meant to depict something else entirely. The faces were stretched, the eyes black voids. "This isn't just a church," she whispered. "No," Erik said. "This was once a chapel, built by Hälsvik's first settlers, long before the village existed." He walked toward the altar, where a heavy wooden cross stood coated in dust. At its base, he noticed something gleaming, a marking carved into the stone. He brushed away the dust and immediately recognized the strange symbols he had seen earlier in the archives. A circle, and inside it, winding lines converging into a single point, a symbol that felt both ancient and disturbingly modern. "Elin," he said quietly, "this is the same as what you found near the old foundations." She knelt beside him, running her fingers over the lines. The stone felt cold, too cold. "It looks like a seal," she whispered. "Or a lock." Erik's eyes sharpened. "A lock for what?" "Maybe, for the city itself." A sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut behind them with a bang. Elin flinched, her flashlight flickering. The silence that followed was so complete they could hear their own heartbeat. Then a sound, something from beneath their feet. A dull, slow knocking. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "Yes." They looked at the floor. The sound came from beneath the altar. Erik took a deep breath and began examining the stones at the foot of the cross. The joints were old, but one stone was different, newer, or at least replaced at a later time. "Help me," he said. And together they pushed at the edge of the stone. With a groan it shifted, releasing a cloud of dust. Beneath it was a metal ring attached to a wooden hatch. "An entrance," Elin said, her voice trembling. Erik nodded. "But to what?" Together they pulled the ring. The wood creaked, the hinge slowly giving way, and a dark opening appeared. A cold, damp breath rose from below, old, stale, carrying the scent of rust and earth. Erik pointed his flashlight downward. A narrow stone staircase descended into the darkness, carved straight into the rock. Rusty rings lined the walls, once likely used for torches. "There's something down there," Elin said softly. "Yes," Erik replied. "The question is, do we want to know what it is?" He stepped onto the first stair. The stone was slick and cold as ice. Every step echoed like a memory from another time. Elin followed him, her flashlight trembling in her hand. At the bottom, a new space opened before them, a cellar, or rather, a crypt. The air was heavy and cold, their breath forming clouds in front of their faces. The walls were covered in drawings, primitive, hurried sketches of human figures worshipping something. In the center of the crypt stood a stone table, blackened by age, marked with traces of ash and what might once have been blood. A shiver ran down Erik's spine. "This isn't a burial chamber," he said. "This is a place for rituals." Elin moved along the wall, letting her light fall on the drawings. She realized they all depicted the same figure, a towering silhouette of ice with hollow eyes and arms stretched toward the sky. Beneath one of the drawings, words were carved hastily in Swedish: "Staden sover, rör den inte." "The city sleeps, do not touch it." She slowly turned to Erik. "They tried to bury it," she whispered. "Or keep it asleep," he answered. Then they saw something on the far side of the crypt, a small wooden box half buried in dust. Erik crouched and opened it. Inside were 3 objects: an old key, a piece of parchment with a map, and a medallion bearing the same symbol as the altar. He spread the map out on the stone table. It was roughly drawn, but the outline was unmistakable. Hälsvik, the mountains, the lake. In the center, deep beneath the northern shore, one word was written: Istaden, the ice city. Elin's breath caught. "They knew it was there," she said, "beneath the lake." Suddenly, the knocking returned, louder, closer. Erik shone his flashlight at the ceiling of the crypt. Dust sprinkled down, and a crack crept slowly across the stone. The sounds seemed to rise from deep within the earth, as if something far below them was trying to wake. "Come on," Erik said sharply. "We need to get out of here." Elin cast one last look back. Her eyes lingered on the altar, where the carved circles seemed to glow faintly under the light. She ran after him, up the stairs, their breaths ragged, their hearts pounding. When they slammed the church door shut behind them, the sound was gone. Only the storm outside whispered, soft, endless. Back at the cafe, they sat in silence. Their hands still trembled. The storm raged outside, but inside a tense quiet hung in the air. "They locked it down there," Elin said at last. "The city. It's real. And Anna, she woke something up." Erik stared at the map on the table. The lines of the lake, the mountains. "She didn't just disappear," he said. "She went to where she believed the truth lay." He looked at Elin, his expression resolute. "And we have to find her before the city fully awakens." Chapter 5. The Lake. The days following their discovery in the church were short and dark. The sun barely rose above the horizon, and the snow never stopped falling. Hälsvik felt like a village slowly suffocating in its own silence. Erik sat at his table, the small box open before him. The key glimmered in the weak light of the oil lamp, and the map lay spread out beside a half-empty bottle of whiskey. His fingers traced the outline of the lake, the heart of the mystery. Elin entered, her face pale, her coat still dusted with snow. "I went to the library," she said quietly. "There's something you need to read." She placed an old book on the table, its leather cover torn and yellowed. Faded letters on the spine read, "Ritualerna av Istaden." Erik looked up. "The Rituals of the Ice City." She nodded. It was written by a priest who lived here in the 19th century. He describes the disappearance of several young women, always around the same time of year. He writes that they were chosen by the city beneath the ice. Erik leaned back. Chosen, or sacrificed. Elin flipped through the pages until she found an illustration. A drawing of a stone circle on the edge of a frozen lake. In the center stood a figure, half human, half shadow. The lake, Erik whispered. Elin nodded. The priest wrote that the entrance to the city beneath the ice lies there, exactly where no one dares to fish anymore. Erik stood, pulled on his heavy coat, and grabbed his flashlight. Then that's where we're going. Elin stared at him. Tonight? Yes. When the night is at its deepest, secrets lie closest to the truth. The snowstorm was relentless. The trees around the lake stood like sentinels in the dark, their branches heavy with snow. The ice groaned beneath their feet as Erik and Elin crossed the frozen surface. The wind cut into their faces, and the cold crawled beneath their clothes as though the night itself were alive. They reached the center of the lake. The moon broke through the clouds for a moment, illuminating the vast expanse, an endless mirror of blue and white. There, exactly where the map had indicated, they saw something, a circle of stones, partially buried beneath the snow. The same symbols, Elin said. She brushed the snow aside, revealing a set of runes identical to those in the church. Erik knelt, his breath heavy in the freezing air. This is the place. Suddenly, he felt something, a vibration. The ice beneath his hand seemed to shift, not crack, but pulse, as though something deep under the surface was alive. Elin looked at him. Erik, do you feel that? He nodded. She activated the ritual, Anna. Before he could say more, a dull thud echoed beneath the ice. Once, twice. Then a low, resonant hum, like a heartbeat. Snow swirled around them in spirals, the wind turning strangely warm, disturbingly alive. Then they saw it. Beneath the ice, faintly visible in the blue glow of the moonlight, something moved. A shape. A city. Chapter 6. The city beneath the ice. They stared downward, breathless. Beneath the ice lay a network of streets, buildings of crystal and stone, all frozen in perfect silence. Yet in some of the windows, faint lights flickered, as if life still lingered there. Erik felt his stomach tighten. It's real, Elin whispered. The frozen city. Before they could react, the ice beneath them suddenly gave way. A crack split open with a deafening roar, and the world tilted. Erik felt the cold clutch of water, heard Elin scream. Then everything dissolved into darkness. When he opened his eyes again, he was lying on the hard, frozen ground. The air was bluish, dimly lit by something that was not the sun. Before him rose towering structures, cathedrals of ice. The city breathed, slowly, rhythmically. Elin lay beside him, unconscious but alive. Elin. She stirred and opened her eyes. We're here, she whispered, under the ice. Slowly they stood. The city was beautiful and terrifying at once. Every street gleamed like glass, yet in the silence something whispered, a soft murmur that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Erik turned in a slow circle. She's watching us. Who? Elin asked. The city. They followed the path leading them deeper into the frozen metropolis. The buildings seemed to shift as they passed, walls breathing, shadows shifting of their own accord. In the center of a vast square, they saw something that resembled an altar made of ice and stone, and there, lying on top of it, was Anna. Her skin was pale as marble, her lips blue, but her eyes were open, staring directly at them. "Anna!" Elin cried. She ran toward her, but Erik held her back. "Don't touch her," he said. "Not yet." Anna moved her head slightly. Her voice was barely audible, but clear. "I thought I could find her. The city. She spoke to me. She promised. Warmth." Erik knelt beside her. "What do you mean?" "She's alive," Anna whispered. "The city lives. She doesn't want to be forgotten." Elin looked around. "She means the city itself has consciousness." Anna closed her eyes. She was once human, then stone, now ice. Suddenly the ground beneath them trembled. The walls of the buildings began to sing, a low note rising in intensity. Anna's body began to glow. "Erik," Elin shouted, "what's happening to her?" "She's being taken," he said, his voice breaking. "The city wants her." The city pulsed, the air thickening, harder to breathe. It felt as though the very water around them grew heavier. The voices surrounding them, there were hundreds now, whispering in a language older than words. Anna's body began to twist, as if she were struggling against something unseen. "She's taking me," Anna whispered. "She wants to live through me." Erik grabbed her hand. "No, we're not letting that happen." Elin clutched the medallion they had taken from the crypt. "This might be the key," she said. "The church's seal. If we place it on the altar, we might be able to seal her away again." The ground split open. A beam of light shot upward from the depths of the city. Erik looked from Anna to Elin. "If we do this, we might stop the city. But Anna..." Elin swallowed. "We'll lose her." Erik hesitated, but in Anna's eyes he saw something, a silent plea, a quiet permission. She squeezed his hand. "Do it," she whispered. "Let me rest." He gently placed the medallion on the altar. A bright blue light filled the chamber. The city groaned, a sound like a final breath. The walls began to crack, the ice splitting open. Erik quickly picked up the medallion again and grabbed Elin. "Run!" They fled through the collapsing streets, the light above them growing brighter and brighter. The city caved in, layer by layer, as if pulling itself back into the depths beneath the ice. Chapter 7. The Silence After the Storm. Erik woke on the shore of the lake. The sky was clear. The storm was gone. Elin lay beside him, her face pale but calm. She was breathing. "Anna," he whispered. Elin looked around. There was no trace of her, only a thin layer of ice on the water, beneath which a faint blue glow slowly faded. They remained silent for a long time. Only the wind through the trees broke the stillness. "She sacrificed herself," Elin said. Erik nodded. "And the city is frozen again." They stood. The lake lay still, serene, as if nothing had ever happened. Weeks later, Hälsvik had settled back into its usual quiet. The snow lay thick, the sky was clear and blue. People seldom spoke of Anna Karlsson anymore. In the village church, the cracks in the floor were repaired, and the altar was blessed anew. Erik sat in his house on the edge of the village. On the table before him lay the medallion, cold, silent, without light. He stared at it for a long time, as if waiting for it to speak again. Elin entered. She wore her coat, ready to leave. "I'm going back to Stockholm," she said. "I have enough stories to last me a lifetime." "And I'll stay here," he replied. "Someone has to guard the silence." She smiled, though her eyes glistened. "The city is frozen again, Erik. Let her sleep." He nodded. "I will." When she left, he remained alone. Outside, the snow fell softly, peacefully. But deep beneath the lake, under layers of ice and time, something pulsed one last time. A single slow breath. The city slept. For now.